The Matrix is everywhere. It's all around us. Here, even in this room. You can see it out your window or on your television. You feel it when you go to work or go to church or pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, like everyone else. You were born into bondage, kept inside a prison that you cannot smell, taste, or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no going back. You take the blue pill, and the story ends. You wake up in your bed and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember that all I am offering is the truth, nothing more.
Take my time, flex like wool. I take my time, just let's go.
Welcome to Pop Culture Catechism, conversations about music, movies, and the longings of the human heart. Let's get started. What if I told you that machines are becoming more like humans and humans are becoming more like machines? What if I told you that the phrase, "what if I told you," isn't actually in the movie The Matrix? What? Is this reality? Is everything I believed actually wrong? We're talking about The Matrix like it's partying like we're 1999 because The Matrix is having a fourth movie come out. Can you believe it?
Finally,
The Matrix trilogy came out starting in 1999 and then through the early 2000s. But they're having a fourth one right around Christmas time. So Merry Christmas, Matrix, everybody. The one is going to return, and it's a great time to talk about, I think, one of the best movie franchises and one of my favorite movie franchises of all time. Hopefully the new movie doesn't suck. But that's what we're going to talk about today. But before that, we want to tell you a little bit about this show, Pop Culture Catechism. Go to popculturecatechism.com and you can become a patron of this show and support this show and support the staff and keep the lights on and the cameras running. There's 6 tiers that you can choose from. Pick something that fits your budget, that fits your tithe, and you get perks that go with each level. Every patron gets access to exclusive content. So with this episode specifically, after you're done watching this, you can go to in the Awaken app, the Pop Culture Catechist community group, and we will be discussing, what's it called again?
the Neuralink.
The Neuralink. No, but there's some, and like chips in our brains and like the ethics of that and the possibilities of that.
Wild.
We just watched a video on it with Elon Musk. It was crazy. So anyway,
living in the future.
So that's going to be what we're discussing, the exclusive content. So check that out afterwards. And if you're not a patron yet, what are you waiting for? Go to popculturecatechism.com and help us out. And that is all through the Awaken app. The Awaken app has lots of exclusive stuff for patrons, but even if you're not a patron, there's lots of free stuff too. It's a hub for all the Awaken shows and all the Awaken content, but there's a Christian music library, there's a prayer library. It's just an online Catholic community where we try to avoid a lot of the toxicity that happens on some other social media platforms. And it's, over 1,000 members now. We're growing all the time. So find some like-minded Catholics and Christians. And it's a cool thing. So, and of course you can share, you can like this on YouTube or Facebook. You can subscribe. You can, if you know someone who's a big fan of The Matrix, you can send this to them. Or if you just like your conversation, you can take a screenshot and say, hey, I think you'd appreciate it. And let us know what you think in the comments. We want this to be an ongoing conversation. So thank you for being with us. And thank you so much to our patrons who make this show possible. I am Mike Tenney. I am the host of Pop Culture Catechism. I was a Catholic high school theology teacher for over a decade, and at the same time, I was trying to make it as a rock star at night, playing in different clubs and bars and wherever I could play music and recording albums and writing songs. And now I am a speaker and a worship leader, and I run this show, and I love talking about pop culture and where we can find God and lessons about life, the universe, and everything in music and movies and shows. I am blessed today to be joined by the president and founder of Awaken Catholic, whose little brain cooked up everything you see here.
Mike, the blessing is all mine.
Yes, Morpheus. Nick De La Torre, Nicholas Francisco Felipe De La Torre.
Yes.
Right? In the flesh. So
you nailed it.
All right.
Seriously, it's an honor to be here. And Mike, on behalf of Awaken Catholic and on behalf of everyone that consumes the content and the staff and everyone, I just want to say thank you for doing what you do, because you're awesome at what you do. The energy that you bring, the passion, the love of the Lord, and bringing love of the Lord to others, the love of others, the love, all of it. Seriously, you're a beautiful guy, and I'm so proud to call you friend, and I've been blessed by you in my life. So
you too, man. You too. It's just like this ministry has really been a beautiful friendship that started. So,
I actually, not to keep tooting your horn here, but like we were talking earlier about, we were just kind of rapping about, man, how far we've come at Awaken and all the journey that we've been on, and trying to navigate where God's taking things. And like I was reflecting on how we started everything, and how I had approached a bunch of different people that I knew were passionate about different topics, and you uniquely were the one person I approached to host a show on Awaken, not because I knew of a specific area that like you were an expert in, but because of what I knew about you, and like you as a man, you as a person, the role that you had started to play in my life as a friend and person that I trusted, to get feedback from, to give pushback, or to get pushback from, and just some of the ways that you were challenging me in a good way to go deeper with the Lord and in my life, and as a husband and as a father and a dude, and I was just like, that's a guy that should be preaching. He should be spitting some truth on Awaken. And so I reached out to you.
Little did you know I was an expert in Taylor Swift.
Which is exactly what we needed.
Thank you. Well, and I feel similarly, just the coming here every few months to film and getting to be a part of your house, and Alina's in the production booth right now, and just see your kids and the way you run your household with such a radical missionary spirit for the Lord. It's something I want to be a part of. And I mean, you guys challenged me to be a better husband, a better man, to run a better house and be devoted and to the Lord and to my family and what He's called me to. So the feeling is mutual, my friend. Love you a lot.
I wasn't ready for this.
Okay. Well, it is Christmas time. It's not Christmas time right now when we're filming it, but this is going to come out right at Christmas time when The Matrix is coming out. So we've decked out the studio. I got my Jesus birthday boy ugly Christmas sweater on, and I got the hat. I'm just really hot. I might lose this shirt at some point. We got the Rudolph.
One can only hope, Mike. One can only hope.
I have another shirt on underneath.
Oh,
anyway, we need to get on with the episode. If you don't know what The Matrix is, The Matrix was a movie that came out in 1999 with a super cool special effects and like the commercials and the trailers, but they wouldn't say anything about the plot. Like I feel like almost every trailer now ruins the plot and gives away spoilers in the plot, and it was just like nobody can be told what The Matrix is, and the website was just like whatisthematrix.com. It was super mysterious. And I remember I was a little bit young to see it. Like I was a young teenager, and like my older brothers could see it, my dad went and saw it, but I wasn't allowed to see it till I was a little bit older. And I was like, how wasn't there like we can't tell you anything about it, you just need to go in blind. So if you haven't seen The Matrix, like Matrix #1 yet, like don't let anybody tell you anything about it, and we're gonna have tons of spoilers here, so just go watch it. It is such a good movie, and it still holds up. You know how the special effects hold up.
It really does. Well, because honestly, it introduced, one of the reasons it holds up is because it introduced a new era of special effects that we're still living in today. Like the special effects that we'll see in action movies and kung fu movies, sci-fi movies, so much of it was influenced heavily by this movie, which pioneered a lot of that technology. Like they literally created special effects technology for this movie. Yeah, like that whole idea, like where the cameras pan around and the guy flies back like that, and they call it bullet time. Like that was pioneered for The Matrix. So yeah, a lot of the early CGI stuff was developed for this movie. So can we throw the movie poster up there? Let's see. This is The Matrix. You see Keanu Reeves, and he wasn't. I guess he had been in Speed. He had been in some bigger things before. Well, and he was, what was it, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? Yeah, he was kind of a comedy guy, and then Speed, it was his first like action role, and then this made him like a huge star and probably set him up to play John Wick and all those other things. So Lawrence Fishburne, Carrie, what's her name? Who plays Trinity? I can't remember her name. I keep wanting to say Carrie Elwes, but that's a guy. No, great actor. That's Wesley, the farm boy. Carrie. I can't remember, but anyway, she was in. She was in Memento too. She was in Memento. She was really good in that movie. That movie's wild. And the guy that plays Cypher, the bad guy. Spoilers. He's also really good. Although and he was also in Memento. He was also in Memento. Was he really? Yeah, he was the best friend. It's been so many years since I've seen it. We need to watch Memento. That's such a good movie if you've never seen it. That's worth an episode eventually. Yeah, we should do that eventually. Matrix Reloaded. This was the sequel, which ended on a huge cliffhanger, and then Matrix Revolutions, which a lot of people think is the weakest of the three. I like it. I like seeing the whole saga together. But yeah, I think a lot of people think this is the weakest of the three. I think it is worth watching all three to get the full story. But I will say, for me, the second and third movies are equally awful. Yeah. Okay. I mean, to me, they don't hold up to the glory that was the first.
The first movie is just amazing.
It's one of the best movies ever made, in my opinion.
I think so too. Too. Although the fight scenes in the second one are ridiculous.
They are, but they're also so loaded with CGI, and it's not good CGI.
Well, I'm not thinking of the Agent Smith fight. I'm thinking of the fight with the twins.
That's a great scene.
That's a great fight scene. And then the highway chase.
The highway chase is amazing.
Is ridiculous.
And the twins are also in that.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
I think
it's bonkers.
Those two might be the best fight
Carrie
scenes.
Ann Moss.
Carrie Ann Moss, yeah.
That's Trinity.
Okay.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Oh, and Hugo Weaving, who's huge.
Hugo Weaving, yes.
He went on to be in Lord of the Rings. He was like the head elf.
He was
guy.
Elrond, and he was Red Skull in Captain America.
Yep.
And Hugo Weaving is great.
And the other guy, Cypher, that you were talking about, that's Joe Pantoliano.
Okay, yeah. Alrighty.
Not a household name.
And Jada Pinkett Smith, I think, was in the second and third one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So great.
She was great
actresses. Yeah, she was. And I think so I know at least Carrie Ann Moss and Keanu Reeves are coming back for it's called Resurrections, right? Matrix Resurrections. And Neil Patrick Harris is in it, which I think is kind of cool. I kind of like Neil Patrick Harris. I don't know if you ever saw Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog or whatever.
No.
Oh, we need to watch that sometime.
Whenever I think of Neil Patrick Harris, I think about White Castle.
What is
that movie called?
Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
Yeah.
Also a terrible,
awful movie,
funny movie.
Yeah, but hilarious. Yeah.
Well, sometime we'll watch Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, and he's great. But I love Neil Patrick Harris. I think he's great. I'm excited to see him in this movie. I'm excited just to see this movie in general, and I hope it's great.
They are also bringing Morpheus back, but it's not Lawrence Fishburne. And I found that really interesting. They picked a much younger actor, and so I feel like there has to be a narrative reason for that, because Lawrence Fishburne said that he didn't even get an invite. He didn't even know they were making a fourth movie.
Whoa.
And so that sucks to be that guy.
Suck, yeah.
But there must be some kind of narrative reason that they needed it to be a younger version of Morpheus.
Well, I know in between the second and the third movie, or maybe between the first and the second movie, the woman that plays the Oracle changes.
Oh, yeah.
She gets recast. And Neo, when he sees her, he's like, "You're different." And she's like, "Well, this is why." And they kind of explain it. And I don't know if they did that on purpose, like if they cast her differently on purpose, or if they had to cast her differently and then they
honestly, I think that the original one might have passed away. I could be remembering that wrong, but I think that's what happened.
Yeah,
anyways,
I don't really remember.
I shouldn't say things on a podcast that aren't real. I don't know. It might be real.
Well, so let's get into some of the themes, because they're so rich thematically. And we were talking just earlier today. And you were, do you remember what you were telling me earlier today?
Yeah, there's that scene, I took a note of this. There's that scene where Agent Smith and, the other agents, they basically are able to get their hands on Neo, or, Thomas Anderson at the time. And they, it's the scene right before they plant the bug in him. But anyways, like Agent Smith is interrogating him. And it's a really powerful clip, because to me it really speaks a lot to like the human condition and somewhat of our story, like going all the way back to the garden. So Agent Smith says to him, "It seems that you've been living two lives. One, you're this isn't a direct quote, because I tried to use the voice to text thing, and it was not working out well. So I'm doing my best to fill in the blanks here with what I do remember. But seems that you've been living two lives. In one, you're Thomas Anderson, a program writer from a respectable software company. You have a social security number. You do your you do your taxes. You help your landlady carry out her garbage. And the other, in the other life." The voice to text really butchered this. Computers, you go by the alias, the hacker alias Neo. And anyways, like I was thinking about how when I watched this scene, I was like really struck by Agent Smith's role as the accuser and like trying to like tell us what our identity is and call us out on like our hypocrisy, on our on the ways in which so many people, nobody's intrinsically bad, right? Like everybody is born and conceived, made in the image and likeness of God. Yeah. We're stained by original sin. Yeah. But like all of us have this spark of good that we want to be good, and we have a confusion about what good is a lot of times. And so like in our striving for good, we a lot of times confuse that with what brings us pleasure, what brings us comfort, what brings us security, and I think that most people, especially before a real like spiritual awakening or before they kind of like turn their lives towards God or encounter the Lord in a real powerful way, most people do find themselves like trying to be good people. They don't necessarily have a reference point for what that is other than maybe other good people that they think are good, but then also living lives that are entrenched in sin and like entrenched in wounds and struggles. And it's not like once you become Christian that goes away. Like we all still have struggles, we all still have tensions, but like we're more aware of that. And in this case, like Neo is living this double life, but he might not even realize what he's doing in a sense. And when we put ourselves in the character of Neo in that conversation, in that dialogue, like, Satan can be telling us like, on the one hand, you do nice things for your landlady, but on the other hand, you're a pirate. You're a software pirate, and you hack things and you create viruses, and it can kind of like create a scenario in which we build our identities around these false permanent realities. Like Satan wants to tell us what our identity is in a way that like imprisons us to those identities. And so the other thing that Agent Smith goes on to tell him here is like, we have reason to believe you've heard from a terrorist called Morpheus. Forget whatever you think you know about Morpheus, whatever he's told you. And it made me think so much about the garden where Satan is telling Adam and Eve, like, God, he doesn't actually know what's best for you. He doesn't actually want what's best for you. He's lying to you. And like there were just so much congruency, so many parallels in this dialogue to like the lies that we receive every single day. So that's what we talked about earlier today.
Well, first of all, so the idea that we are inherently good, but we're broken, and so we need to be redeemed by sin. I just want to point out that many non-Catholic Christians, like our Protestant brothers and sisters, like especially from the theology of like Luther and Calvin, a more reformed evangelical tradition, if you ask them, are humans fundamentally good or bad? They would say bad. Right. Like the view, like Luther at one point says that we are like poop covered in snow, and the snow, like we are the poop, and the snow is the grace of Christ that just like covers us so that we're like no longer offensive. Or like in a courtroom, we are guilty, like we committed the murder, but the judge just like lets us off because of his mercy, or the jury just lets us off because of his mercy. So we're declared innocent because of Jesus, but really we're guilty. And from a Catholic perspective, we would emphasize the created nature rather than the fallen nature. We would say, no, God created us good in his image and likeness, and original sin corrupted us, but did not totally corrupt us. There's still some goodness in us, and we're fundamentally good at the core. And so that emphasis on the brokenness and the fallenness of human nature is more of a Protestant thing. And Catholics tend to say, well, yes, we are broken. Yes, we still need Christ. We still need to be saved. But fundamentally at our core, we are good. And so I just wanted to point out that distinction. Also, there is so much Christian imagery, Christian language, like Zion is the name of the human city that survives from the machines. The Nebuchadnezzar is the name of the ship, which was like the name of an ancient Babylonian emperor. There's the prophet, the one, the chosen one. Trinity is the name of one of the characters, and so there's so much Christian language. Like Morpheus ends up like dying and sacrificing himself, and then resurrecting at least once throughout in the first movie. Like there's these resurrections that come back, and like the fourth movie is called Resurrection. So there's so much Christian language. But I read an article, and I'll try to find it and put in the show notes, but this is like back in like 2002 that I read this probably. So I don't know if I'll be able to find it again, but it basically laid out how it's actually not based on Christianity, but Gnostic Christianity. So if you're not familiar with your early Christian heresies, what Gnosticism was, Gnostic means knowledge. Like we got it's Gnostic, kind of like in English, we have the KNOW for know. It means knowledge. So the Gnostics were an early Christian group that believed that the only people that would be saved are this small secret group who had this secret knowledge. And what they knew, the secret knowledge was that the flesh and our bodies were bad, and that the spirit world was good. It was very based on Plato, the idea that, like, if you ever studied in philosophy in college, like Plato was all about the forms, the perfection, the idea of a thing, rather than the reality and fleshed reality of the thing. And that was his that was kind of his disagreement with Aristotle. Aristotle was like, no, we're both a body and a soul, whereas Plato was more like emphasized just the soul, and the body is not as it is an imperfection. And the Gnostics took that even a step further, and a lot of the followers of Plato, the Platonists as they're called, took that a step further to be like a body is a kind of a cage, a trap for your soul. So the body is bad, and we need to escape this body and like go to heaven. And so like the Gnostics, some groups of them like never, like they didn't believe in sex at all, because they believed that when you had sex and you conceived a child, you were like trapping a soul in a body. And
when you say that they didn't believe in sex, you mean they didn't believe in having sex?
In having sex. Yeah, they believed it existed, but they didn't believe in having sex.
Because you were trapping a soul.
Because you were trapping a soul in a body, and our whole job is to escape this world and go to heaven, which is still, I still think that's an idea that a lot of Christians have, but authentic Christianity is no, we are both a body and a soul, and God came to redeem this world, right?
Yeah.
Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, and we're meant to live the kingdom here and now. And yes, there will be a heaven there where we go to rest, but there will also be this resurrection of the body. Jesus' bodily resurrection. It wasn't just a ghost that came back. It was a bodily resurrection that ate breakfast, as it says in the Gospel of John, and Thomas like puts his hands in the wounds, and we will, like, our bodies will be resurrected and reconstituted, as it talks about in 1 Corinthians 15, and it'll be like his glorified body, a risen body, a real body that's like mysterious and we can't really understand it. But the spirituality of the Matrix is very much based in Gnosticism.
Yeah.
And his name is Thomas Anderson. Neo's name is Thomas Anderson. The famous Gnostic gospel is the Gospel of Thomas.
Right.
Right. And Anderson, what does Anderson mean? It means son of man.
Wow. Yeah.
So Thomas A. Anderson, I forget what the A stands for in his name, but it's Thomas A. Anderson, Gospel of Thomas, Son of Man. So it's very Gnostic, this idea that we have to, like the Matrix is a trap, right? We're trapped in this. We need to escape it to the real world, but only a select few will actually get there that have this secret knowledge that they've been red pilled. They have the truth, and only this secret group will actually get there. And you still see that in Christianity today.
Absolutely.
There's so many groups that like, oh, we have the secret knowledge.
In Protestant and Catholic circles, you see that.
You have this devotion,
right?
If you go to this type of worship, if you pray this sort of prayer, if you know this sort of thing, oh, then you're part of the select. And the rest of you are just like kind of lukewarm, right? And so
you guys don't really get it.
Yeah,
you don't know what I know.
You're not real Catholics. You're not real Christians. And so we see that Gnosticism coming up again and again. So sorry, I just word vomited.
No,
that's
what
so
happens
good. When you give me whiskey.
And and the root of all sin is pride, right? And like a lot of that, I have a hair in my mouth. A lot of that comes from.
I'm glad that's online.
Pride, yeah, it's like a cat hair. A lot of that comes from like that excitement that we get, like, oh, I've discovered something that is maybe rare, or that like I didn't know before, and a lot of other people don't know this, and because of this knowledge, I now like, there's a degree to which I've ascended to a higher plane of existence, and it's just so it's so understandable. Like I want to be forgiving of people that fall into that trap.
Oh yeah, sure.
I fell into that trap.
Yeah.
When I fell in love with God in college, really for the first time in my life, and I fell in love with the Catholic Church, really for the first time in my life, again in college.
Yeah.
Like I was so in love with the knowledge that I had grown into and that I had come to understand, that 100% my pride kicked in.
Yeah.
100% the pride that I had and the knowledge that I had grown to acquire, to understand, like that ruined a lot of relationships, that like ruined opportunities that I had in front of me to evangelize someone, because the knowledge came before the relationship in that moment. Not like I was consciously like, hey, knowledge is more important than relationship, but it was more like I was so excited by the knowledge that I knew that I wanted to teach other people that I lost sight of what that comes second to, and that comes second to relationship. And so like I relate to that 100%. It's totally natural, but we all like it's just so prevalent in communities Protestant or Catholic, right? For Catholics, like you said, like devotions, like, Medjugorje, like, not to get controversial, but people like swear by Medjugorje and like the experiences they've had there, experiences other people have had there. But then other people are like, if you believe in Medjugorje, but then the people that feel connected to that are like, if you don't believe in Medjugorje, you're whatever. And then like for Protestants, like if you haven't learned Greek and translated your own Bible, like you don't love Jesus as much as I love Jesus.
Or if you're not charismatic.
Right, yeah.
Or if you don't love the Latin Mass.
Right.
Or if you're not like, primarily into social justice. Like it happens all over the church in all sorts of different ways. And it reminds me of Paul in 1 Corinthians where he says, he's talking about the charismatics and he's like, you can speak in tongues and you can interpret tongues and you can have all these things, but if you don't have love, it's a clanging gong. Right.
Yes.
It's all worthless. Right. And
that's
as
so
it says
good.
in Ephesians, like our works are like they're like dirty rags. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's in Ephesians. Maybe Isaiah. I don't know. I'm drinking whiskey.
It's in the book.
I'm drinking whiskey. It's in the Bible somewhere.
You can read it.
It's got to come back to love. And I totally associate with what you're saying. Like when I first went to Catholic U and I was like, all right, me and my friends, we're going to daily mass and like we're taking food to homeless people and we're like part of the pro-life group and praying the rosary and going to praise and worship and doing adoration and like doing all these things and doing social justice stuff. And it was the first time in my life I'd really been part of like a really thriving Catholic community, and it was like made me come alive. But I remember like one time I was home on break and I like went out to lunch with like two of my best friends from high school, Ashley and Monica. Love you girls. Hope to see you at the reunion this year. And we went out to like Bennigan's and like it was so good to like catch up, but like I spent the entire time of that lunch, I monopolized like the whole conversation talking about like the Catholic Church's approach to contraception.
Wow.
And like doctrine and like what I learned because like one of the girls was about to get married and like
that was totally me, like not in that topic, but that was totally me.
And like now looking back, it's like so cringy. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Not that I don't believe that stuff because I do and I support it, but it's like.
But like that's not an effective opportunity.
Well, and just like catch up with your friends.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, 100%. Like that goes so much further
exactly
in the long run. You got to play the long game.
Yeah.
You got to play the long game.
Well, and even just like seeing relationships as relationships and not just like it's my job to make sure that you believe all the right doctrines.
You know what, Mike? This is the perfect segue back to the Matrix because if you look at I was watching a piece of the first movie again today and I was like reminded all over again of my frustrations at some of the ways in which Morpheus chose to lead and chose to be a leader, chose to help Neo through the transition into the real world.
Okay.
I get frustrated when I watch some of those scenes and I'm like, because Morpheus is sitting there with Neo in the construct. And again, we're presuming you've watched this, so we can use some of this lingo.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Morpheus is sitting there with Neo in the construct. This is Neo's first like foray into the false world, the false reality of the Matrix or other programs. Morpheus like, nobody can tell you what the Matrix is. And I was like, yes, you can. It's a simulation, and like these are obvious things. But the masterful thing that's happening when Morpheus is being super ambiguous and super elusive and like taking his sweet ass time to explain the Matrix to Neo, when it could have been done in like a couple of sentences. What he's doing is helping Neo like adapt to it. Right. And in contrast, you and I, other people that get excited about the faith, we're just like, boom, 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 boom. Here's what the Matrix is. You've been living a lie, blah, 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 blah. And like Morpheus, that dude was the master evangelist. He was like, I'm gonna usher you gently into this truth. I'm gonna let you experience this truth.
Whoa.
And that's what he does. He doesn't tell Neo truth. He lets Neo experience truth, and he walks with him in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
literally just hit me right now.
Yeah, well, in kind of applying it to real world. So he offers him the pill,
right?
Which we started this whole bit with.
Yeah, so he makes it voluntary first.
Yeah, he makes it voluntary, and he tells him like, you can go back to the way you're living, or you can have this experience which is going to change you and is the truth. And you have a choice to be like, well, you're crazy, man. I'm fine with my life. I'll go back to it. And it reminds me of like, trying to get kids to go on a retreat or go on, get friends to come to an experience. Is just, the right way to do it is just be like, hey, you want to come with me? I think it's very powerful. I think you'll get a lot out of this. I think you'll experience something, but you don't have to come. It's totally up to you.
Or you can take the blue pill.
Yeah. So I think there's a way to do that gently. I would love to talk about there's scene where, so Agent Smith with Morpheus. You talked about Agent Smith with Neo.
Yeah.
But Agent Smith with Morpheus, there's a scene where the machines capture Morpheus because Cypher has decided to betray them. And Agent Smith, who's really a computer program, says, I'd like to share a revelation I've had during my time here, meaning my time like in the Matrix dealing with humans. It came to me when I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with their surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to another area. You multiply and you multiply until every natural resource is consumed. The only way you can survive is to spread to another area.
Yeah, he calls this a virus.
Yeah, there is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what that is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer on this planet. You are a plague, and we are the cure. And I think a lot of people today, like that's their anthropology. That is their understanding of human nature. They see humans
and the church.
And the church as a plague on this planet.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I'm not going to have kids. There's too many people everywhere, overpopulation and this, that, and the other thing.
Look at the Crusades, all that kind of stuff over the course of the centuries. The church has been around a long time, right?
Okay. Like religion is a virus.
Religion is, yeah. So I Agent Smith, again, this just struck me now as you were reading that part of the script. Like literally that's representative of a lot of people who with good intentions, nobody's like, religion is evil because I'm evil. So I'm going to nobody's evil intrinsically. Again, like going back to like the Catholic view of the human person, like people are good and they're trying their best.
Yeah.
And so in trying their best, a lot of people come to the conclusion when they look at some of what's happened historically, when they look at like what Agent Smith described, a lot of people see not only humanity, but also specifically the church. Like there have been church leadership and people representing the church, whether formally or informally, who have done some stuff that's like, you're a virus.
Yeah.
You're making things worse, not better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like specifically, it makes me think of the difference between like how a lot of people see our relationship to the environment, and people talk about like global warming and climate change and all those sorts of things. And there are a lot of awful things that we're doing to the planet. And the Christian perspective, which I think Pope Francis very beautifully described in his encyclical Laudato Si, and the difference is the Catholic and Pope Francis, and I think the authentically Christian biblical way to see is that at the center, the solution to the problem is humans as made in the image and likeness of God, given dominion and as stewards of creation, right?
Yeah.
Like we are the reason creation exists.
Right.
And so it always has to put the human person first.
Yes.
And so it's a very pro-life approach to quote unquote environmentalism, right? It's not environmentalism for the environment's sake. It's environmentalism for the sake of this beautiful world that God has created and placed us in stewardship of. And so if you've never read Laudato Si, I highly encourage you to, like, because the Pope Francis has such a beautiful vision for connecting what it means to be pro-life, not just anti-abortion pro-life, but pro-life in a way that encompasses so many issues, including the environment that God has made us in his image to reflect to the world are like his love for us and his love for the world. In the Gospel in Mark at the end, it says that you should go into the world and preach the gospel, not to all people, but to all creation. Mm-hmm. Preach the gospel to all creation. Like we are supposed to be treating the world as God would treat the world.
Yeah.
And so humans are not the problem. Humans are the solution.
Yeah.
And humans are really the reason for creation. And so I think that's such a key perspective change. And sometimes we may act like a virus, but we're also the cure. Right? Like, it's not the cure to eradicate humans or limit humans or try to, like, the machines kind of try to manage humans. They create this prophecy about the one, and try to, and then they destroy Zion like 5 times or something like that, and then rebirth it and give them this false narrative that there's this one that's going to come save them. This is revealed at the end of the second one by the architect, right?
Yep.
And that's how a lot of people see it, is humans just have to be managed, right? Whereas Pope Francis sees it as, no, humans are we're the solution. We are the stewards of this creation. So,
yeah, I totally agree. I think that we have to contextualize properly, like, what is the earth here for? What is the universe here for? Like, we have been given a role as the prime entities on the planet. Like we do have a role of stewardship. But it's not because, like, the planet matters more than we do. Yeah. It's not like we're the guardians of some treasure for some other thing. Like, we're meant to protect it and care for it. Like, I like to think about Adam and Eve. Like, if Adam and Eve pre-fall, pre-suckage.
Pre-suckage. I think that's
a theological term.
That's the Latin that comes from Aquinas. Pre-suckage.
Pre-suckage, Adam and Eve, they're in charge of stuff. They're caring for the world. They're caring for the garden. They're naming animals and crap. And if they were to see the way that things happen with the world in our hands, how would they react to it? I think that's an interesting kind of perspective to bring to the table. I think that it's convicting too, like, if we're really willing to ask that question. But one of the challenges we face when it comes to, like, preservation of the planet and just all of this is, like, it's become so politicized.
Yeah, I know.
And so, like, you have to imagine a world that hasn't been artificially put into this weird bipartisan dynamic where, like, if you're on the right, you got to think this way, and if you're on the left, you got to think this way. Like, what if we were just, like, free of that, and we were just responsible people that cared for the crap that's in front of us and did the best we could, instead of, like, having to cling to the ideologies that adhere to the proper side of the spectrum that we're on politically.
And I think that's a proper understanding of identity, right? Rather than seeing ourselves as first as conservative or Democrat or liberal, rather than seeing that as our primary identity and the other half of the country as a them, right? Seeing our primary identity as a child of God and letting the church and the truths and the doctrines of the church shape our thinking and shape our identity more than whatever CNN is saying or Fox News is saying or my neighbors are saying, right? And so then, like, I care deeply about the environment, and we switched our energy plan to, like, something. It all comes from, like, geothermal and wind and all that stuff. So, like, and it costs a little bit more, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice because I care about the planet. But like, I'm also super pro-life in the sense that I'm, like, anti-abortion, and, like, those two, like, social justice and pro-life, like, for Catholics, that's the same thing, right? It's not one or the other. And so, like, I can be anti-racist and I can be pro-life, right? And I avoid some of the pitfalls of the secular versions of those things, right? Like, the secular version of anti-racism or the secular version of pro-lifism is like they fall into some traps, and I feel like the authentic, like, Catholic social teaching is so beautiful. And it gives us a way to see the world and a lens to see the world that's not just this false American political polarity. So,
and I think that's a lot of what the Matrix is about, is, like, there's a false narrative that surrounds you. It's everywhere around you. You can smell it, you can taste it, you can see it, you can hear it, and it's everywhere, permeates our existence. But as soon as you're willing to release that false narrative, you see the world in a totally new way. And that, I think, is, one of the best takeaways to have from the Matrix. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the false narrative relative to what we were just talking about would be, like, that bipartisan,
One more thing I'll say about creation. So just like if you read the first few chapters of Genesis, it's really beautiful the way God and the scriptural authors use two different stories to send us the same message. So the first chapter of Genesis, if you read through, it's the 7 days of creation, where God starts off, in the beginning was nothing, but then he said, let there be light. And there's the light and the dark. And then there's the sea and the land. And then there's the sea creatures. And then there's the land creatures. And each day God says, and at the end of the day, God said it was good. And then he gets to the last day and he makes human beings, male and female, in his image. And God said it was very good. And so we are the apex of creation. We're the purpose of creation, that everything else was made for the purpose of this, and it's not complete until then. And then after then, God can rest. And then chapter 2, it says, well, when God created the earth, it was kind of like this. There was this river, and God planted a garden, and it kind of shows us like God's transcendence and God's immanence. Those are fancy theological words that he's like, the Father is way up above us, but then like the Son and the Spirit are like right here with us. And what does he create first? He creates humans first, right? And so in the first story, humans are created last as like the finishing touches. In the second story, they were created first as the reason for everything else, because he creates humanity. And then it says, well, I see that it's not good for the man to be alone. And so he creates all these animals, but none of them are a suitable partner. And then he reaches into the core, to the heart of the man through his rib and takes it out. And then he makes male and female. And it's interesting, the word, John Paul II points this out in Theology of the Body, the word that God uses for man before woman's creation is Adam. That's where we get the word Adam, and it means mankind. But after he creates woman, then he calls the man male. So it's not like God created the dudes first and the chicks second. Sorry for using that sort of language.
Chicks.
It's not
You're
like,
such a sexist, Mike.
It's not like he made the males first and the female second. He made humanity. And so it's not good for a person to be alone. And so then like our sexuality is born out of this desire that we are made for relationship. We're made for relationship with God. We're made for relationship with one another. And we are the foundation of creation. We're the apex. We're the purpose of creation, but we're also the foundation of creation. And he uses these two creation stories to teach us this beautiful truth about human dignity. And I love the first few chapters of creation.
Yeah.
And then you get to chapter 3, and the freaking devil screws it up with his lies, like Agent Smith, and we get the suckage.
The suck. Again, a Thomistic theological term. Yes.
Yeah. If you go back to the Greek, it's translated. The more accurate translation is the suckage. Yeah. Can we talk about robots and AI?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So like AI is getting pretty advanced.
It's getting very advanced.
Right? Like we can say, okay, Google, okay, Siri, okay, Alexa. Like we have, like even my children know how to use Siri, and they tell us where to drive, and they can tell us to turn stuff on, turn stuff off. Like they're listening to us all the time through our phones and everything. And like we have the Terminator, we have the Matrix. We just did an episode a few months ago on Dune, where there was this ancient war with robots, and so they're not allowed to even make artificial intelligences. That's like a sacrosanct rule in humanity. So like, do you first of all, do you think we can create an AI and that the like Terminator or the Matrix could happen? Like, do you think that's a real possibility?
So I think that it's a yes and no.
Okay.
So the no part of it, I'll respond to first. The no part, in my opinion, is can we create a soul that has a spiritual quality?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is getting a little bit nerdy on theological terms here, but a lot of
speculative.
Right. So the word soul is a lot of times conflated with the word spirit, because we as humans, our soul is a spirit, but the word soul throughout history has a lot of times been used by theologians to apply to the essence of life. So like a plant has a soul because it's alive.
Yeah, it's like a vegetative soul.
So it's the quality of something being alive means that it has a soul in a sense. But that's not the same thing as being spiritual. We as humans, uniquely in all of creation, so like angels are spirits, right? Trees, anything that's alive, grass, has a soul. We animals, right? We uniquely in creation are both soul, where we have a physical life energy. We are also spiritual, all in one. So like our soul is spirit and our spirit is soul. Okay, so I don't think we will ever, because we are not God, we will never create an AI that has a spiritual quality where it is a spiritual entity. We may create, through computational like algorithmic qualities, we may create an artificial intelligence that can interface, that can interact with us, that can interact with the world, but that doesn't mean it has like a spiritual reality.
Like it could, do you know what the Turing Test is?
Yeah.
So the Turing Test, Alan Turing, there was a great movie about him starring Benedict Cumberbatch. Basically, he said he was like this code breaker during World War II that became like one of the first like computer programmers, and he said basically artificial intelligence, the way you know that it's really an artificial intelligence is if he made this thing called the Turing Test, where like if you could mistake it for a real person,
right?
And so if it doesn't, like, you know, you ask Siri, like, hey Siri, can you do this for me? And he's like, I don't understand. Can you say that again? Like, it doesn't pass the Turing Test, you know?
Sorry, Siri.
Like, if you could mistake it for a real person, that's the Turing Test. So what I hear you saying is that we could make an AI that could pass the Turing Test, but it won't really be a person.
Correct.
It won't really have a spirit.
Right.
And I think I disagree with you.
Really?
I do. And again, this is theological speculation.
Yeah, we're totally speculating the crap out of this.
Here. But I think like God has given us the ability through like natural sexual intercourse and procreation to create souls.
We co-create.
We co-create, right, with God. Like we're sub-creators, you could say, in Tolkien's language. And there's other ways that we've used our technology through like artificial insemination and maybe potentially through cloning one day, where we can also co-create souls, right? And I think potentially like if you think of it like Data from Star Trek or even like Agent Smith, like if they have real choice, like I think we could artificially get to the point where we could create something that like the word in Latin for soul is anima. Like an animal is something with a soul. It's not a rational soul. Like humans have rational souls or spirits, as you said. Angels have rational souls or spirits, like you said. Like I think, and again, this is just my opinion, shooting from the hip, and I don't think that this hasn't happened yet, so the church hasn't come out with an opinion on it yet. But like I think we could potentially create like a robot, an artificial intelligence that really was a person. And we see this this idea played out in the Animatrix. There was a number of there was like 9 animes made about like what happened between current day and Matrix 1. And one of the things that happens in that is like humans really abuse these robots and these AI, and they're like treated like slaves. And as this growing consciousness of robots and humans come, and they're used for forced labor, which, I mean, we used robots for forced labor, but it's not wrong because it's a robot. But once that robot develops consciousness, like, can it develop consciousness? I guess that's kind of the conversation we're having. But, you know, like robots could potentially, probably at some point, like they'll be used for sex, you know, I'm sure the pornography.
No, that's actually already a thing.
Yeah. So the pornography industry will use it for that. And so that's damaging to the person, the human who's using that, right? It's hurtful to their dignity, but to the extent that AI has consciousness, I would say, and again, I'm just shooting from the hip, that's also offensive to the dignity of that intelligence, right? And I think as pro-life people, we try to have an expansive view of human rights, right?
Yeah.
We try to have an expansive view of rights, not a limited view of rights.
Well, and really, like, you could say it would be anti-life to maltreat an animal, a pet.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it has the same dignity as a human. It means it's wrong to hurt an innocent animal or whatever, right? So like, I would agree with you that I think that we can create something that is so advanced that it's maybe as smart as a dog or even smarter because, you know, it's computationally insane. But like, but we could never create something that has a spiritual, because the spirit is something only like that's on a whole level of creation that like, we can co-create a human being, but we can't like turn a robot. We can create algorithms in a computer that are incredible and very human-like, but that doesn't mean it has a spiritual essence that we'll see in heaven with us, right?
I don't know. I think I disagree.
Okay.
I think I disagree.
I'm super down for that.
I think God has given us like kind of a natural means to create souls, and I think artificially our technology could get to the point where, you know, it already kind of has, and like I said, like artificial insemination and cloning and that sort of thing. Like, I think we could program something and like it gains a consciousness. Like there's a measure of, like, if you think of Aristotle and Aquinas, like what they said the parts of the soul are, it's like imagination, memory, will. Like if an artificial construct has those things, why is that not a person? Why is that not a rational soul. Like we say it like the physical things are the things we can experience with our five senses. Like we can see it, taste it, touch it, etc.
Right.
But like the spiritual parts of us are the parts of us that are real, but we can't experience them with our five senses, our imagination, or will. There's a great prayer by St. Ignatius, the Anima Christi. It's like, take Lord and receive all my liberty, all my freedom, all my entire will. It's like, it goes through all those Thomistic categories for like, what are the rational parts of the soul? And like, if we can create a program or a robot that has those things, like, again, this is just me shooting from the hip, but why wouldn't we consider that a soul? So
yeah, and I think that where that becomes a very practical question, which is kind of a weird concept for this question to be a practical question. Like, that's a weird thing.
Yeah, but it's coming.
But it is coming, and from a practical standpoint, I would like to think that. I mean, I'd hate to think that the type of people, the type of humanity that would exploit or take advantage of or maltreat an artificial intelligence are the same type of people that are already maltreating human beings.
Yes.
You know, whether it's like, so really ultimately that comes down to like an unfettered capitalism, for example, where it's like, no matter what, we're going to make the bottom line. What do people say? The bottom line dollar, like the bottom dollar is what matters. Like as much profit as possible. Yep. So we're gonna hire illegal immigrants and pay them fractions of a penny and treat them like garbage. Yep. And I'm saying I spent 2 weeks living with illegal immigrants in their migrant camp, and like I saw what their existence was like, and it was tragic and it's heartbreaking. Yeah, and like
that's where our lettuce comes from. Yeah.
Well, in that moment, it was strawberries. Yeah. And like we're eating these strawberries and we're not thinking about all the people that were being treated incredibly unfairly in an inhumane way to get us those strawberries. And I can see the same type of minds, the same type of unfettered capitalism where all that matters is as much profit as possible, no matter who we have to exploit. Whether or not an AI in the future, an artificial intelligence, has a spiritual component that will be in the afterlife with us. It may be that it has a soul and that it's alive, like an animal's alive, like a tree's alive, like a chimpanzee, which can be superhuman-like in many ways. That still has dignity. That still needs to be respected with dignity because it has the capacity to feel, even if it's synthetic, whatever. Like, we will see a day where we treat machines awfully, and we shouldn't.
Okay. Just
because they're synthetic, we don't have a right to treat something like that awfully. And so there, I completely agree with you.
Interesting. Yeah. It makes me think about all sorts of things like factory farming. Being like sometimes like maybe I should be a vegan. You know, like
there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, I'm personally not. I love meat too much, but.
I had like 3 burgers for lunch.
You did, actually.
I did, yeah. Yeah, but it's something I'm thinking about and praying about. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Is a really interesting thing. So,
you know what, Mike? I don't know how long we've been going. This is a Christmas special. Let's just see what happens.
Okay, let's just see what happens.
We don't have to limit it to the normal.
So it's like 11 o'clock.
We'll have micro contact.
Yeah, we're content. Yeah, this is. I've been here filming episodes for days.
Yeah,
this is our last one. We're drinking whiskey, and we'll see where it goes. So buckle your seatbelts, listeners and viewers. Here we go. So the part I wanted to talk about is. This is in the second movie, and Neo is talking to the architect in this moment, and the architect is saying like, oh, this whole prophecy of the one, this is something the machines have concocted and created to kind of manage humanity. We take their innate religious belief, which is kind of this weird evolutionary artifact where they have these transcendental ideas, and we plant this prophecy so that they believe in the one, and then when they decide whoever the one is going to be, you know, then we reset, we destroy Zion, and we start over, and it's happened 5 times already. Okay, and here's your chance, Neo, is you get to survive, and you get to go with Trinity and make babies and repopulate Zion and start over from the beginning, or we just kill off humanity. That's your choice. And here's what he says. He says, "Did you know that the first Matrix was designed to be a perfect human world?" I made a mistake. This is Agent Smith talking to Morpheus in the first movie. "Did you know that the first Matrix was designed to be a perfect human world where none suffered, where everyone would be happy? It was a disaster. No one accepted the program. Entire crops were lost, meaning entire humans that were used as batteries. Some machines believed we lacked the programming language to describe your perfect world. But I believe that as a species, human beings define their reality through suffering and misery. The perfect world was a dream that your primitive cerebrum kept trying to wake up from, which is why the Matrix was redesigned to this, the peak of your civilization. I say your civilization because as soon as we started thinking for you, it became our civilization, the machine civilization, which is, of course, what this is all about. Evolution, Morpheus, evolution. Like the dinosaur, look out that window. You had your time. The future is our world, Morpheus. The future is our time. And so, anyway, my question for you is, do you think that Agent Smith is right that humans can't exist without suffering and struggle?
I mean, that's a super relevant question from a Christian standpoint because we had that and we clearly screwed that up because we couldn't handle it.
You're talking about like the garden? Like
we're talking about the garden.
Pre-lapsarian, pre-suckage.
Pre-suckage, yeah. The pre-era of suckage. Yeah, I mean, we literally had paradise, and it was all too perfect, and we couldn't deal with the parameters that had been given to us for it to stay perfect.
Paradise Lost, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Not a reference to the movie about the Cuban communism.
No,
but
John Milton, English major here, Catholic University, represent.
Yeah, so there's a sense in which we saw that happen. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that from an eternal landscape that it has to be true.
Okay.
And I think that's what the whole point is to the Christian life, is that in our sanctification. See, I think that if paradise is handed to us on a platter, we can't handle that.
Okay.
I think that if paradise is something that we choose day to day, moment to moment, through love, that's a totally different type of paradise.
Okay.
I think that paradise can be found, like you talked earlier about heaven and earth are being remade in that's not the words you said. What did you say?
Like the new creation.
The new creation, the new heaven, the new earth. I think that we have a taste of that here now. It isn't just some future thought. It isn't just some goal down the road.
Yeah.
We have a taste of that here and now when someone chooses love over selfishness, when someone chooses love over hate, when someone chooses to be a gift rather than to take. And I think that it depends on what our definition of paradise is.
Yeah. And
it depends on what makes up that paradise.
Interesting. I think I agree with you that, I think theologians have speculated this throughout the years. Did Adam and Eve, was it inevitable that they would have fallen, or is it potentially a thing that they wouldn't have? Could they have chosen otherwise? And I think we have in the example of Jesus, somebody who was created, conceived without sin, just like Adam and Eve were. They didn't choose that. Of course, he's both God and man. So you might say, he's God, that's why. But we also have, at least in Catholic and Orthodox belief, the Blessed Mother, right? Who was created without sin, who had that eternal view, as you said, who had that human view, or I'm sorry, the heavenly view, just a created nature, not a fallen nature, protected from saved preemptively by Christ. St. Bonaventure, I think it is, says she's still saved by Christ, but it was preemptively. You know, most of humanity has fallen in the pit, and salvation is he pulls us out. Yeah. But for Mary, it was she was walking.
It was retroactive.
Yeah, or she was walking towards the pit, and he's like, "Whoa, don't fall in that pit." He still saved her from the pit. She still needed to be saved, but it was a special grace, a miracle just for her, because she had this special place in creation as the Mother of God. And so we have an example in the Blessed Mother. I'm wondering, we have Mother Teresa.
Yeah, sorry.
I have her around my neck. I have the miraculous medal.
There you go.
We have an example in the Blessed Mother of somebody who was given that heavenly perspective and didn't choose. And she wasn't fully God and fully man. She was just fully man. She was just fully human, and she didn't choose sin, right? She could have. She had full freedom, made in the image and likeness of God, but she didn't choose. And I think that's one of the reasons why God chose to do that miracle. And God, again, this is just me shooting from the hip, but I think God chose to make her conceived without sin, to be the new Eve, to show us that sin was not inevitable. You don't have to choose sin. It didn't have to be this way. And to give us a vision of someone who was just human, right? Because it's not that Jesus wasn't fully human. He was fully human. But I think it's easy for us to be like, well, he's also God.
Right,
so, of course, he's not going to sin. But the Blessed Mother, she did what Adam and Eve didn't. Not what they couldn't, but what they didn't.
Yeah.
And so I disagree with Agent Smith. I think we could be happy in our created nature, not in our fallen nature, but in our created nature. Now, the beautiful thing about Christianity is that what does God do with that suffering? What does God do with that hardship? He crucifies it on the cross and redeems it, and now there's resurrection from that. And so any hardship we go through in this life, any tough thing we go through in this life, not only can God walk with us through it and get us through it, but he can bring a greater good from it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is like miraculous in his providence, and it blows our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Agent Smith, you need Jesus.
That's awesome. No, I totally agree with you. I think that is key. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Next question. At the end of the movie, there's this scene where Cypher starts to, spoilers, betray everyone. And he starts unplugging his friends from the Matrix. Like, this scene is so heartbreaking.
It's so heart-wrenching.
And like Trinity is there like pleading with him, and he's just like, you know, this is what he said. I copied it. He lied to us, Trinity. He tricked us. If he would have told us the truth, we would have told him to shove that red pill up his arse.
Saying it British makes it better.
Apparently. And Trinity says, that's not true, Cypher. He has set us free. And Cypher says, free? You call this free? All I do is what he tells me to do. And if I have to choose between that and the Matrix, I choose the Matrix. And Trinity says, the Matrix isn't real. Cypher says, oh, I disagree, Trinity. I think the Matrix can be more real than this world. I mean, all I do is pull a plug here, but you have to watch a man die. And so basically Cypher is like, he's made this deal with the machines where he gets to go live this happy, blissful life, blissfully unaware that he's living in a false world, and it seems more real to him. And so, and I think this is very applicable to the life of the Christian, is we can choose to live blissfully unaware, like spend all our spare time just watching Netflix, browsing on our phone, consumed with all the things of this world, and just ignore the larger questions, right? And Christ is saying, no, I want to set you free from that. There is something more. But once you take that step, once you take that red pill, once you choose to see the world for what it really is, it's more than just the American dream. It's more than just wealth and pleasure and control and power, which are what Aquinas says are the substitutes for God. And there's one more that I'm forgetting, but like
wow.
once you choose those things, like they don't satisfy, right? And Trinity say, no, they're not real. They're not real. And so I think the question for us is like, do you believe the lie? Do you believe that the world has to sell you what the Matrix has to sell you? In the end, do you choose the Matrix? Or do you choose this reality, which is a lot harder in a lot of ways?
That's exactly it. I think that it requires so much. So like if you look at the way that the Matrix is portrayed versus the way that the real world is portrayed in the movie, like when they're in the real world, they're on board the Nebuchadnezzar ship. They're all wearing rags essentially. They're I mean it's a rough existence.
And they're like shaved.
Yeah, what they have to eat, what they have to eat is this gross goop. And so there is this dynamic where in reality it's a world of suffering. It's a world of not having creature comforts, of survival.
Yeah.
But in the Matrix, everything is clean cut. Everything is organized. Everything is like handed to you. And there's like this dynamic where because the Matrix is the easier path, Cypher chooses that because even though he knows it's a lie, he doesn't want to suffer. And how many times do we see that in the Christian life amongst our Christian brothers and sisters where it's like, the church is asking too much of me. Jesus is asking too much of me. God is asking too much of me, even though I know that he is real, even though I know that the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus Christ instituted, even though I know that the saints before me have set an example of what is possible in the power of the Holy Spirit in terms of a Christian witness and the capacity to endure suffering and all of that, and martyrdom, even though I know all of these things, even though I know what true love is in God, it's asking too much of me. I want to cohabitate. I don't want to give to the poor. I don't want to give my life to God. I want to have the creature comforts of the world. I want to have a successful career, and for that to be the God that I worship. I want that to be what I spend my time striving towards. So even though I know what is true, I'm going to take the easier route. And listen, I don't say easier route like diminishing how real and how challenging that is for people. Like it's a very real and very human thing. But it still is that. It is the easier route.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, you were like speaking from inside my conscience right there. So there's, I'm trying to look up the exact scripture, but I'm not sure exactly where it is. In Matthew 7, here it is. So, Jesus has this parable where he says, enter through the narrow gate.
Yeah.
For the path is wide and the road broad that leads to destruction, and many will follow it. Choose instead the narrow gate, which is narrow and difficult, and those who find it are few.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of verse that Gnostics grasp onto, but but it's true for the church too, is we have this choice, and we can just go with the ways of the world, or we can choose the narrow path, and it's harder, but it's the one that leads to real freedom, right?
Yes.
And somebody pointed, this is so obvious when you say it this way, but we often live this way and we don't realize it, is, do you want to be like everybody else? No, I actually don't want to be like everybody else, but how often do we make decisions based on what everybody else is doing, right? Or at least the people around us, those in our tribe, those who think like us, those who we identify with are choosing. But if you want to live differently, you have to act differently, right? If you want to have a different life than what the average everyone else is doing, then you got to make different decisions, right? And so that's Jesus saying, like, choose the narrow path. Yeah. And so often in Christianity, we get this idea of heaven and hell as like, if you're good, God rewards you when you go to heaven. And if you're bad, God punishes you and you go to hell. And there's some metaphors about heaven and hell in the afterlife like that in the scriptures, like Matthew 25 with the separation of the sheep and the goats. And, there is some of that. But there's also passages like this where Jesus says, it's your choice. And here's the narrow gate and here's the wide gate. I didn't come to condemn, but to save. And you can choose the light or the dark, as it says in John 3. Like, I came into the world as light. God gave his only son, right? His only begotten son, that whoever believes in him would have eternal life, but some, rather than the light, preferred the darkness and chose the darkness. And so we have a choice. Yeah.
And the example we see in Cypher's character in the part of the plot that you're talking about here, like, it's so perfect, because in choosing that easier route, the route of less suffering, the route where things are so much easier, in choosing that, you're literally, and Cypher was literally voluntarily saying, I would rather be a slave to evil. I would rather be a slave to machines and live in a dream world where I am the God and I have whatever I want. I would rather that than this truth, than the truth. And so sin, when we are self-centered, when we want to be our own gods, we are literally choosing voluntarily to enslave ourselves to addictions, to the darkness of the world, to wounds, to continued wounding of our own selves and of others. I mean, literally, the other dynamic that was happening there in that scene you were describing, Cypher's walking around the room killing everyone. Yeah. He's literally walking around the room, unplugging people from the matrix without going through the process properly, which meant he was killing them. Yep. So in the selfishness, like, and we do that in our sin, whether it's killing people's reputations through gossip or killing people's dignity through the way we treat them or whatever. Like, we literally, there's no such thing as private sin. There's no such thing as private selfishness. Like, everything affects everyone. And
so what that makes me think of is, yes, you're right that in some ways that path of the broad gate is easier, But in another sense, it's harder because it doesn't satisfy. And you're constantly frustrated and racked with anxiety, right? And I'm not talking about like clinical anxiety because there's a whole
totally different thing.
I'm not like a psychologist. That's not what I'm saying. But there's another sense in which the way of Christ is easier. In Matthew 11, he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and are heavy burdened, who are bogged down with all the anxieties of life, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon." Don't choose the chains of the world. Like, don't let that be your master. Like, I will be your master, and I am a good master. Take my yoke upon you, and for I am humble of heart, and that my yoke is easy and my burden light. And there's a real sense in which the Christian life is easier. We call it the consolation of faith. And even when things are hard, like, I know I can go to prayer. I know I can go to the sacraments. I can go to my Christian community. I have these avenues of grace, which make my temptations easier, which makes my hardships easier, make my struggle, my work, my calling, all of those things easier. And so in one sense, you're right. The way of the world is easier, but in another way, it's so much harder in the long run.
The life with Christ is one where there's grace and there's power. There's and that's really one thing that I think that the Matrix did not provide for us in this narrative. But where Jesus really does invite that, where he wants to take on our suffering and stuff, and so that's huge. Absolutely.
Yeah. Another scripture it makes me think of is after the story of the rich young man. It's not a parable; it's a real story that actually happens. There's a rich young man who comes to Jesus and says, "Master, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And he says, "Well, follow the commandments." He's like, "Check, I got those." And it says Jesus looked at him and loved him, and he said, "Then sell what you have and give to the poor and come follow me." And the young man turns and goes away sad. And then he turns to the apostles, his disciples, and says, "How hard it is for those who are rich, who have these trappings of the world, to enter heaven." And the whole thing about the camel, and it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter heaven. And Peter says to him, I love Peter's questions. Peter's always the one to ask the question that everyone was thinking. And he says, then who can be saved? And Jesus says, for human beings, this is impossible, but for God, all things are possible. And Peter says, we've given up everything, right? We've been on the road with you. We've given up everything and followed you. And he says, there is no one who has given up family or houses or anything for me that will not receive 100 times more in this life with persecutions. And I think he says like many times more in this life with persecutions and 100 times more in the kingdom. So like breaking that down, he's saying you will receive benefits even in this life, but also with persecutions. I'm not saying if you follow me, it's all going to be easy, but I am going to help you in this life. That yoke is easy. That is going to be truth. There's still going to be persecutions. There's still going to be hardship. But then in the age to come, like that's really when it's going to happen. Like we have in the here and now a glimpse of that kingdom come, and we're called to live that kingdom now, and we get some of the benefits of that kingdom now. But we won't see the real fulfillment, the fullness of the kingdom and the fullness of those benefits until the resurrection and the age to come, as it says in the Gospel of John. So yeah. So Amen. You give me whiskey, I start quoting scripture. That's how it happens.
I love it. No, it's beautiful. Absolutely.
All right. So I think we've gone a while. I think we're ready to wrap this up and land this albatross that we've been talking through. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Simulation theory, and I have no idea what this is. So this episode is going to go a little longer. I hope that's okay. Tell me about simulation theory.
Simulation theory. So if you're still with us here, Mike mentioned earlier that the exclusive bonus content for the patron community, we're going to be talking about the Neuralink that Elon Musk is developing, or the people that he employs are developing. And one of the other things that Elon Musk is a huge proponent of is the likelihood, according to him, that we are living in a simulation. Now, the relevance of this is that that's what the Matrix is all about, is that the human race is living in a simulation as their bodies are being used to power the machine's existence. And so part of why Elon Musk is proposing this as a strong likelihood has to do with how far advanced our own technology is. And so according to some calculations, the fact that within such a near future, we will have the capacity to create such a realistic virtual existence that it could be confusable with real world. So, he sees this through the advances we've made in virtual reality, the Oculus Rift and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The Oculus Quest 2, which Facebook now, is making, and every other person has an Oculus Quest 2. We have one. Virtual reality is becoming a lot more available and a lot more advanced than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And that combined with some of the greatest advancements in artificial intelligence, in terms of the interaction with people, can be seen actually in video games.
Yeah.
So what's called NPCs are, what does that stand for?
Non-playable characters.
Non-playable characters, right? Like, so the characters in a game that are not you or another person, they have such advanced artificial intelligence nowadays where they can interact with what your choices are in the game in ways that are fairly convincing.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. And so when you combine a lot of the technological advancements that I just mentioned and then so many others, Elon Musk is proposing, like, we're so close to being able to create a simulated reality for ourselves that is confusable with our own reality, that the likelihood that we are not living in a simulated reality based on some calculation is insanely low. So that there's a greater likelihood that we are living in a simulation than that we're not.
Interesting.
Obviously, this is not compatible with a Christian worldview or theology, right? Yeah. But what I do find super interesting about it is everyone is authentically trying their best.
Yeah.
To figure this world out.
Yeah.
Right? You think about ancient civilizations, they see the sun. Oh my gosh, that must be a god providing its light and its warmth and whatever, right? So like that wasn't them trying to be pagan. That was them trying to figure out the world in the absence of divine revelation.
And there's a seed of truth there,
right,
as the documents of Vatican II
correct.
say. Yeah,
absolutely. So I look at world religions, philosophies as everybody, even if they are wrong according to my Catholic worldview, they're trying their best to figure it out, right? I look at Elon Musk and the reasons he has for his assumption that it's far more likely that we're living in a simulation than that we're not. The implication behind us living in a simulation is essentially this. Our world is not random. And it was created by a higher existence.
Well, duh, Elon.
That's exactly right. And so from my standpoint, it's like, I'm okay with some degree of someone buying into this if it helps them see that we were created.
Yeah.
If it helps them see that this world was created. Because in fact, we were created, and this world was indeed created. And whether or not they understand our world as ones and zeros, which is like digital programming, right? Like, even if they see our world as being a digital fabricated reality, like they're still acknowledging the truth that we are not a random occurrence.
Yeah.
And that's a fundamental truth.
It might appear random.
It might appear random to some more atheistic scientists or whatever, but I honestly feel like the simulation theory is a closer step towards truth than atheistic scientists that refuse to acknowledge that maybe the Big Bang came from a God that created all of it on purpose through the Big Bang and whatever,
By the way, one of the main theorizers of the Big Bang, Catholic priests.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
And so I love that simulation theory is gaining as much credibility as it is amongst so many thinkers nowadays because it's an inch away from a random, meaningless existence and an inch towards we were created.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of the world stepping in that direction.
Yeah, me too. So Elon Musk is not the first person to grapple with this.
Right,
So if you ever studied philosophy, René Descartes, famous Enlightenment thinker, one of the he tried to like construct reality from the most basic things we could know. And one of the things he struggled with is like, is everything I see, can I even trust my senses, right? And is this all being constructed by some evil genie, some evil supernatural force, some evil genius? And what he comes to is the famous phrase that you may have heard, cogito ergo sum in Latin, which means I think, therefore I am. So even if I am in a simulation, that doesn't mean I'm not real, right? I think, therefore I am. I know that I'm thinking and thinking about thinking and reflecting. That means I'm real. right? That means I am real and I am really a person. And Aquinas and Augustine had their own kind of versions of this. And the difference between the evil genie or the simulation theory and the Christian worldview is we understand the quote unquote simulation as created by a good, benevolent God, and not just a God in the small g sense of like a superpower more powerful than us, but as like the very ground of existence, right? He's not just the highest on the chain.
He is existence.
Yeah, he's not just the highest on the chain of beings. He is being, right? And to the extent that we are beings, we are just like a little fraction of him, right? And so that's the difference. But I think you're right. Simulation theory is a little bit closer. It's a step in the right direction, right? There's a seed of truth there. So,
yeah.
Wow, that blew my mind a little bit. Okay, so let's bring this in for a landing. Would you lead us in a prayer about all this stuff? Would you close us in prayer?
Yeah.
So, dear listeners and viewers, wherever you are, just take a moment to pause, and we're going to pray.
In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
God, sometimes it can feel like we don't understand what is happening around us, why we have to endure some of the suffering that we do, or why others that we care about have to endure the suffering that they do. But we put it all at your feet, Lord. Your ways are far above our ways, and we can only see what's in front of us. And we trust your wisdom. We trust your goodness and your power to redeem all things. We trust in your resurrection and the promise of our own resurrection. Help us to live your kingdom here and now through our love, through the love of those around us, and help us to remain rooted in your love. We praise you, God, and we humbly bring all of this to you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Praise God. Thank you, brother. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
thanks for having me.
Thank you, viewers and listeners, for following with us through this a little bit longer than normal episode, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And let us know what you think of everything we said in the comments. I would love to continue this conversation. And go see Matrix 4. I'm gonna go see Matrix 4. I'm looking forward to seeing, or Matrix Resurrections, I guess as it's called. Looking forward to seeing what it has to say. And thank you for all of those who support us as patrons. You are what keeps this studio going and what keeps us able to keep doing what we're doing. So a special thank you to our patrons. And if you are a patron, don't forget to go to In the Awaken app, the Pop Culture Catechism group right after that, and you can get exclusive content for this episode. We're going to talk more about the Neuralink and the implications of being plugged into machines, and if that's a real possibility for the future. And if you're not a patron yet, go to popculturecatechism.com, pick one of the 6 tiers that fits with your budget and your tithe, and help us to continue the work that we're doing, trying to spread the gospel through pop culture. And even if you're not a patron, you can go to theawakenapp.io and download the app, and there's lots of cool things there. There's a community, prayer, music library, lots of cool stuff there. You can chat with a show host like Nick and like me. And as always, you can share this episode with people who you think would benefit from it. Give us a like on YouTube or Facebook, subscribe. All those things help us. Thank you so much for your support and for watching. We love you. Jesus loves you more. Merry Christmas. Real quick, I need to give a very special thank you to our patrons who support this show and make it possible, especially Troy, Henry, Carlin, Melissa Gore, Lisa and Bob Tenney, Stephen, Maggie Hubbard, Rob Smith, Tom and Emily Camberiotti, and to all our patrons who give generously. Thank you so much, and make sure you check out the exclusive content in the app. I just uploaded a bunch of my old talks, which are there now, and also, after this episode, Alina De La Torre, the wonderful Nick's wife, jumped in on the conversation, and you don't get to hear from her very much in the Awaken shows, so definitely check that out. Thank you, and Merry Christmas to all of you.